Good evening. I'm glad to see all of you here today and in this study about do not worry. Now, do not worry also includes do not be anxious. It means the same thing, maybe different levels, but in all reality, it's the same. You're worried. This is one of the problems that Christians have, that the world also has. Whereas Christians shouldn't have it because they are privileged to have more information than the world has. Let's take a look at it and go from there. Our first part is about depression. And depression is looking at the past and seeing what happened and bringing it forward to today. Let's take a look and see what that means. It means that number one, we are making assumptions about the past. We're assuming certain things about what has happened in the past and how it affects us today. Thinking about the past brings up a lot of memories and is a lot of problems. In fact, many of us don't even want to go back to the past and revisit any of that. Yet some love wallowing in it and living in it. And here's what goes on. When you start thinking about the past, you've got all kinds of ideas about what has happened. You may have been bullied in the past, or maybe somehow you were abused in some fashion, or things were just took a bad turn. And you revisit this on a frequent basis. Now, here's what's interesting about that. As a general rule, people cannot remember exactly what happened. Policemen will tell you that when they get eyewitness testimony, they'll get four or five different, if they have 4 or 5 different people, they'll get 4 or 5 different witness testimonies about what the person looked like. The reality is you probably don't know it correctly. But even so, when you dwell on, you're making assumptions about the past. And so what happens is feelings take over. And what kind of feelings? There's all kinds. But the main problem with looking backwards is anger, loss of interest in life, and even some sleep disorders take over. Not wanting to sleep, or sleeping all the time, or being frustrated and angry about the past. And so when somebody talks to you today, you lash out at them from what has happened in the past and you're still living it. Or maybe you think, I can't accomplish anything. I can't do anything. I can't ever be anything because of what has happened in the past. And this continues to build. You've made the assumptions, you continue dwelling on it, you start feeling about it, and what happens? It grows to the point of hopelessness and self-blame. Well, if I could have just done this, or if I'd changed that, and all that stuff. And it breeds a victim mentality where you could do nothing and still can't do anything about it. And so it is hopeless, hopeless, hopeless. And you keep hoping that, well, maybe someday, somehow, in some way, I'll be able to get out of this and be able to live a decent, good life. And maybe someday there'll be someone who loves me enough that I can change who I am, and it just ends in total despair. That's depression. Looking at the past. Now, that's half of what worry is. The other part, there's the panic attacks. That's looking at the future. where we get afraid and something overwhelms us and we just seem like we can't control the fear that is coursing through us. And here's what's going on. You see, we're making predictions as if they are realities. We get into a small space and we say, I can't get out. I can't get out. I've got to get out of here. I've got to get. And you are predicting that somehow you will die if you stay in there. Well, here's the problem with predictions. Predictions are like the weather forecast. They are not the weather. And how many times you've watched the weather forecast and the person who's doing the weather reporting is wrong, consistently wrong. So what do you do about it? It's not the truth. It's just a prediction about tomorrow or the condition you're in. What's going to happen? Some people get afraid when they go outside. It's just too open. Other people get afraid when they get in a small space. People get afraid of all kinds of things, spiders and even opportunities and being successful or whatever. And predictions mean, when we make these predictions, it means we're living an imagined future. Our future is not the future we have, but something we're just dreaming about. And we're dreaming it while we're awake. And here's the problem with that. Because not only are we imagining a future and living in this imagination so that it overwhelms us, we come at it from a negative bias. We're overwhelmingly think that everything we dream about and we believe is true about our future is a negative bias and will over and outweigh anything positive. No matter how much positive stuff happens, I can't succeed, or I can't be happy, or I can't feel comfortable because I am making that prediction. And it may be based on who you think you are or who you think you have become because of the past, but it's looking towards the future with a negative bent. So look at that. Worry comes from looking backwards in a way and looking forwards in a negative way. Let's take a look now. I made this little example here for you to be able to understand exactly what you are doing to yourself. Let's pretend that life is like this cauldron here with a fire under it, and it's kept fairly warm. That's life. We're busy, we're doing. It's warm, it's not cold. But when something bad happens, we should be able to handle it. And when there's more wood put under the fire right now, the water's not so hot that we are going to explode. But there's a problem. You see, there's all the worries and anxieties about the past that keep haunting us while we're alive and now today. And today, our water gets hot because of whatever happened in the past. And so we're defensively having to deal with our feelings today and the feelings of the past, whatever they may be. And then along comes our thought process of tomorrow, the predictions we make about the future. Maybe it be this evening, or maybe it be in the next minute, or maybe it be whatever it is in the future. We believe, and that adds wood to the fire too. So what happens here? We've got wood from the past. A fire from the past. We have fire from the future, and the fire of today. And then when somebody comes along and does something that really irritates us, boom, we explode. And we can't figure out why did we get so mad over that little thing and destroy a friendship or whatever, a job or whatever. It's because we're living in all three places at the same time. The past is fueling our fire, the future's fueling our fire, and when something happens today, we can't take it, we just explode. So let's talk about today. How do we live for today? Here's what God says about that. Do not worry. Now, let's see why and how he is helping us not worry. In Deuteronomy 31 in verse 8, it says this. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. What's he saying there? Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Discouraged is the beginning of it. See, you remember we talked about how it's progressive, how it grows? And when we are wanting to grow something, we want to grow something that's positive and for us. If we don't, we will grow something that's negative and against us. Listen to what it says in Psalms 34 and verse 7. Let's see, Proverbs 34 and verse 17. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their trouble. Now, you say to me, okay, GW, what are you talking about here? We're supposed to not worry. Look at my past. Yeah, I see it. I see it. Look at my future. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Here's how you do it. Yeah, practice being in the present, not in the past or the future. Now, it's important that you have to practice this. And the word practice means that you're getting better at it. Let's pretend you wanted to play the piano. When you first sat down to play the piano and you banged out a simple little tune, maybe chopsticks. You remember that? And it was all you could play. The question is, were you playing the piano? Yes, you were. Now, the more you practice, the better you're going to be. It does not require perfect practice to be perfect. It requires practice and persistent practice to be perfect. And what happens is you become a piano player, and then you become a great piano player. Then you become a fantastic piano player. I remember this little picture about Winnie the Pooh walking down the path, and there with him is Piglet, and he says to him, what day is it? Asked Pooh. It's today, squeaked Piglet. Ah, my favorite day, says Pooh. You remember that? That's being in the present, not in the past and not in the future, but in today. And today is a very great word. Yesterday when you got up, it was today. Tomorrow when you get up, it'll be today. You can't live any day but today. You can't even live a minute but the minute you're in. You can't count on your successes yesterday to propel you today. And you can't count on your successes or failures in the future to propel you today. Today is today. There is no other but today. Now, here's the thing. You've got to build a new habit. Because the habit you're living off of and when you're worrying is not the habit you should be in. So how do you do that? What in the world are we to do? Okay, let's take a look at Romans 12 and verse 2 and see what he commands us to do. Therefore, that's verse 2. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of the world. What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Don't live according to what the world thinks is right to do, because those things are only according to Satan, and Satan is not for you, he's against you. And he's only going to give you thoughts that you can dwell on to make actions that are against God. All the thoughts that he gives you are lies. And when you dwell on them, it makes you have evil desires in which you then produce evil actions. So what do you have to do? Well, he goes on there in verse 2. But be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Did you hear that? The building of a new habit. In other words, training yourself that that old habit isn't the way to go. And so here's what you got to do. You've got to pay attention to what's going on in your mind and make sure you recognize it as the fake news it is. It is fake to you. It is not true. What happened in the past is in the past. Don't let it rule today. And what's going to happen in the future isn't here yet. Don't let it rule today. Build a new habit that will bring about a new you so that you are the person you're supposed to be. Isn't that interesting? How do you do that? Well, you've got to change the way you think. And the way you do it is by dwelling on what's good to dwell on. And the way you do it is by arresting that behavior you were going to do and putting a new behavior out here. And it takes about 2 or 3 months to accomplish that if you stick with it. And when you fail, you're going to have to start again, and it's going to take 2 or 3 months in order to build a new habit and be the person you're supposed to be before God. Well, how do I do that? Well, remember, God will not be mocked. And here's what he says in Galatians 6 and verse 7. He says, he will not be mocked, and so what happens is a man reaps what he sows. What do you mean by that? Well, one who sows to please his sinful nature from that nature will reap destruction. Okay, one who sows worry is going to reap destruction. And then he goes on, the one who sows to please the Spirit from the Spirit will reap eternal life. So one who sows what God commands is going to receive what God has promised. So let's take a look at this particular little statement. I love it. This says Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote it. I don't know. I've heard other people. I heard it's unknown. I heard it's a Chinese proverb. I have no idea. But it's true. Look at this. Sow a thought and reap an action. Sow an action and reap a habit. Sow a habit and reap a character. Sow a character and reap a destiny. Now listen to what it says. What you think and dwell upon, is the way you're going to act. What you believe to be true and hold dear to your heart is going to drive your behavior. And so your behavior over a persistent, consistent amount of time is going to build up a habit that your mind accepts as the way to act. And it will come out and it will be your character. And because that's who you are, it is going to be where you go in eternity. So now, hear it again. See, sow a thought. Let's say you sow a thought for God, of God, and you're going to reap an action of God. Sow an act of God, and you're going to reap a habit. And sow that habit of God, and you're going to reap a character like God, and which means you will reap the destiny of living with God in eternal life. Sow a thought, keep, in other words, hold on to and put it in your fertile mind, the thought from Satan, and you'll reap actions that are against your nature as a person who was created in the image of God. And if you sow that action, you're going to, and hang on to it and do it again and again and again, you're going to reap a habit. And when you sow a habit, your character is going to be that from as a person not of God, not following the truth. And if you sow that kind of character, your destiny will be with Satan forever. Now let's read Philippians and chapter 4 and verse 8. Let's see where our mind needs to be today. Not tomorrow, today. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. Now, here's the key. You've got to be present today and make sure what you do today is for today, because that's what you'll be judged on today. Let the past go. Don't live in the future. Live for today and do what is right before you're gone. That's the whole story. Don't worry. How? By changing and living for today. Don't have anxiety. How? Don't have these panic attacks. How do I do that? Live for what's real. For today, don't make predictions. Don't bring up and dredge up the past. Be who you are today. Be a child of God and hang your life and all your actions on the promises of God. Thank you.